Good morning, I'm Maiki Oreta and you're watching Business 360, where we break down the numbers, connect the dots, and give you the developments and the insights you need to navigate, adapt, and lead. Let's dive right in. The Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, or OECD, expects the global economy to slow to 3.1% this year, driven by geopolitical uncertainties affecting trade and investments. Senator Imee Marcos pushes for a Senate inquiry into the arrest of former President Rodrigo Duterte, a move with political ramifications. MRT3 General Manager Oscar Bongon is removed from his post after Transport Secretary Vince Dizon inspects the train system, signaling potential changes for Metro Manila's transport sector. All that and more coming up. First, let's take a look at how financial markets performed overnight. U.S. stocks rallied for a second straight session on Monday as investors assessed the latest economic data to gauge the impact of the Trump administration's policies. Retail sales rebounded marginally in February, but fell short of expectations. U.S. home builders' sentiment dropped to a 7-month low in March as tariffs on imported materials raised construction costs.
Well, I think investors are carrying on the optimism that was generated at the end of last week after the S&P 500 closed below the 10% decline threshold. And so I think investors are anticipating at least a counter-trend rally in the near term. And then after the FOMC meeting and press conference on Wednesday, I think they'll decide whether this continuation can last for another week or so.
The Dow Jones Industrial Average gained 0.9%, the S&P 500 higher by 0.6%, while the Nasdaq Composite up by 0.3%. Elsewhere in the world, in Europe, markets are up, with the UK's FTSE higher by 0.6%, Germany's DAX higher by 0.7%, and France's CAC 40 higher by 0.6%. Now, the global economy is projected to slow to 3.1% in 2025. Data from the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, or OECD, shows this is slightly below the 3.2% recorded in 2024. The OECD also forecasts further deceleration to 3% in 2026. The OECD attributes this slowdown to rising trade barriers across several G20 economies, as well as to heightened geopolitical and policy uncertainty, factors that are dampening investment and household spending. For the Philippines, a weaker global economy could mean softer demand for exports, slower investments, and heightened market volatility. However, strong domestic spending and infrastructure projects may help offset these external headwinds. Now, investor confidence in the Philippines remains high. That's according to Palace Press Officer Claire Castro, despite the arrest of former President Rodrigo Duterte by the International Criminal Court, or ICC, last week, which prompted protests in some parts of the country. Castro says that the Marcos administration is not alarmed by the impact of the arrest on foreign investors, as they want countries and their leaders to comply with the law, not harbor individuals involved in crimes against humanity. She also claims that the arrest of Duterte demonstrated the country's compliance with international law. But market analysts warn that political uncertainty could still affect investor sentiment in the short term, especially if instability escalates. Leading fiber internet provider Converge ICT Solutions Incorporated reported a nearly 11 billion peso profit in 2024. In its disclosure to the Philippine Stock Exchange, this marks an almost 20% increase from the 9.1 billion pesos recorded in 2023. The company, owned by billionaire Dennis Uy, attributes the growth to a strong performance in its residential segment, which grew nearly 14% to 34.4 billion pesos, and its enterprise segment, which expanded by almost 22% to 6.2 billion pesos. Looking ahead, Converge plans to fuel further growth in 2025 with capital expenditures of 20 billion to 25 billion pesos, focusing on international subsea cable systems, 2 data centers, and port expansion. This continued investment signals confidence in the country's digital infrastructure demand as more businesses and households rely on high-speed connectivity. An accredited counsel of the International Criminal Court, or ICC, says that the tribunal has already established its jurisdiction over former President Rodrigo Duterte's case. Speaking with Agenda, the executive director of the Center for International Law, Attorney Andres, states that the ICC now has custody of the former president. As a result, he asserts that the Supreme Court will likely declare the habeas corpus petition filed by the Duterte camp as moot and academic.
Issue of jurisdiction dun sa issue of the arrest and the custody within the ICC. So those are two separate issues. Kasi ang issue of jurisdiction, in the eyes of the ICC will just look at three things. First is jurisdiction rationale materiae. May subject matter jurisdiction ba ang ICC? And yes, meron po sila. Kasi ang charges po dito ay crimes against humanity, which is under Article 5 and Article 7 of the Rome Statute. Ikalawa po, titingnan din ng ICC whether it has jurisdiction rationale temporis, which is the temporal, the time frame. And indeed, ito pong mga nasa charge, nasa arrest warrant, happened indeed within November 1, 2011 hanggang March 16, 2019. Third and lastly, jurisdiction rationale loci. Nangyari po ba ang mga patayan na to, ang crimes against humanity na to within the territory of the Philippines? At lalo nga po, nangyari po siya within the territory of the Philippines. Kaya kung tingnan na po ang tatlong jurisdictional matters na to, ay mayroon pong jurisdiction yung ICC.
Attorney Andres also expresses doubts about efforts to bring back the former president to the Philippines by challenging the legality of his arrest.
Issue naman ng arrest, So, ang question dito, sinong korte ang titingin dito? Is it the Supreme Court or the ICC? Because if it's the ICC, in fact, there's a doctrine under international criminal law. Whatever may be the allegations concerning how the person was arrested is irrelevant to the legitimacy and legality of the proceedings before an international criminal tribunal. Ito po ay isa sa mga doctrines that was even established in the 1960s.
Legal experts say if the Supreme Court rules the habeas corpus petition as moot, it could signal a recognition of the ICC's authority, setting a precedent for future cases involving Philippine officials and potentially affecting the country's stance on international law. Former Chief Presidential Legal Counsel Attorney Salvador Panelo believes that President Ferdinand Bongbong Marcos Jr. can still reverse what he calls a mistake by the government in allowing the arrest of former President Rodrigo Duterte. Panelo tells BNC's On Point that the Office of the Solicitor General's decision not to represent the respondents in the habeas corpus petition filed by the Duterte camp is, in his view, an admission that illegal act was committed. Now, he argues that the administration can still intervene through diplomatic means to rectify the situation.
If I were the president, dahil yung abogado ko sinabing mali yung ginawa ng mga tao natin. Gaya na sinabi niya, walang jurisdiction. I will make a formal request or demand. We committed a mistake on this jurisdictional issue. Actually, not me, but my subordinates, my lower officials. I'm consistent na wala kayong jurisdiction. So, bigay niyo na sa amin uli yan.
And what is...
However, legal experts point out that once a suspect is in the International Criminal Court's custody, any attempt to challenge the arrest would have to be made through the tribunal itself, not through diplomatic negotiations. Senator Imee Marcos plans to investigate the arrest of former President Rodrigo Duterte at the Senate. Malacanang, for its part, says that the president's sister is free to conduct the probe. Hannah T. reports.
Senator Imee Marcos wants a query. Was due process followed in the arrest of former President Rodrigo Duterte? As chair of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, she wants government agencies, including the Justice Department and PNP, to explain their role in handing Duterte over to the ICC last March 11. But her brother, President Bongbong Marcos, had earlier said the arrest was carried out in compliance with Interpol, but did not detail the full extent of the government's involvement. If Senator Imee pushes through with the investigation, it will happen while the Senate is in recess. Under Senate rules, only the Blue Ribbon Committee can hold hearings during the break. But Senate President Chisa Escudero says it can proceed as long as it serves a clear purpose.
Kung ang concern ni Senator Imee ay grabe na yung divisiveness o pagkakawatak-watak natin, edi sana ang maging dulo ng kanyang pagdinig ay maghilom tayo at magkaroon ng pagkakaisang muli at hindi lalo pang dagdagan yung divisiveness o pagkakaaway-away natin.
Senator Imee also skipped the latest alyansa para sa Bagong Pilipinas sortie in Tacloban, a stronghold of the Marcos family. She said it was her way of protesting Duterte's arrest.
Sana hindi makadagdag yung pagdinig niya, kaugnay sa lalong paglalim pa ng sugat at hidwaan sa pagitan ng ating mga kababayan.
Other Nationalista Party senatorial candidates were also absent. Senator Pia Cayetano, who was in Bicol, and House Deputy Speaker Camille Villar, who was sick. Nationalista, led by ultra-bilyonaryo Manny Villar, has long been allied with the Dutertes. Senator Imee adds, should the probe begin, she wants clarity on the country's policies about its cooperation with the ICC and Interpol, and stresses that Philippine laws and jurisdiction must be upheld. Malacanang says the president's sister is free to initiate an investigation. However, Palace Press Office spokesperson Claire Castro denies what Duterte camp claims, that his rights as an accused were violated. Hannah T., Bilyonaryo News Channel.
While the Senate investigation could shed light on the events surrounding Duterte's arrest, legal experts note that the International Criminal Court operates independently, meaning the outcome of the probe may have little to no impact on the case itself. Senate President Francis Chiz Escudero says that the Senate can provide protection to one of their own, Senator Ronald Bato de la Rosa. The former national police chief could face arrest by the International Criminal Court, or ICC, in connection with the Duterte administration's bloody war on drugs. Hannity returns with this report.
Senator Bato de la Rosa cannot be arrested in the Senate premises, even if the ICC issues a warrant against him. That's according to Senate President Chiz Escudero. He adds it has been a long tradition in the institution not to allow law officers to enter its premises to arrest a sitting senator, even during a congressional break.
Historically, may sesyon o wala, again, institutional courtesy dictates na wag ito pasukin ng kapulisan para may posasang senador.
But has De La Rosa seek refuge from the Senate to avoid a possible arrest? Escudero did not confirm. He says they only discussed the fellow senator's legal options and not his intentions. De La Rosa had earlier said he would seek protection from the Senate if the ICC moves to arrest him, following the detention of former President Rodrigo Duterte last week.
Ang sinabi ko sa kanya, we will try to afford him every opportunity to avail of legal remedies that he is entitled to.
But how long can De La Rosa stay in the Senate? Escudero says not indefinitely.
I am holding them on their oath as senators to do what is best not only for themselves but for the country and the institution as well. At hindi para sa kanila idikta yung bilang ng araw kaugnay niyan.
Under the Constitution, only senators charged with crimes punishable by less than 6 years in prison can avoid arrest while Congress is in session. In the case of the ICC, sentences can go up to 30 years. And with Congress on break until June 2, Escudero says the Senate cannot provide protection unless De La Rosa decides to stay inside his office. This is not the first time a senator sought refuge in the Senate. In 1990, former Senate President Juan Ponce Enrile, now Chief Presidential Legal Counsel, was charged with rebellion complexed with murder. He was not arrested inside the Senate, but after giving a speech, he eventually turned himself in. In 2017, former Senator Laila de Lima faced drug-related charges. She spent a night in the Senate before surrendering to authorities. The most recent case involved former Senator Antonio Trillanes in 2018. He stayed in the Senate for 25 days while waiting for the Supreme Court to rule on his petition, challenging then-President Duterte's order to avoid his amnesty for coup d'etat charges. For now, Escudero says the Senate has not received any request of document from the ICC. De La Rosa has yet to respond to Escudero's statement, but the Senate President adds De La Rosa can still file an appeal and request a temporary restraining order from the Supreme Court if an ICC warrant is indeed issued. After all, this is the same move he made to try to stop former President Duterte's arrest. Hannah T., Bilyonaryo News Channel.
While the Senate may assert its ability to protect De La Rosa, legal experts point out that if an ICC warrant is issued, it would require national authorities to comply, raising questions about how far the Senate's protection could actually go. We're taking a quick break. Please stay with us as we dive deep into the numbers and the narratives that matter most to your bottom line. Welcome back. Let's take a look at how Asian bourses are faring this morning after the positive performance in the West, in markets in the West overnight. Let's see if they're spilling over here in Asia. Right now, the Nikkei 225 is higher by 1.5%. Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index higher as well, higher by 1.6%. Shanghai's Composite in the green, but not by as much, up by just 0.1%. Singapore's Straits Times Index up by 0.9%. Let's take a look at how our market is doing right now. Recall the PSE Index extended its winning streak to a third straight session yesterday, lifted by positive U.S. market sentiment and strong local remittance data. Overseas Filipino remittances rose to 2.9% year-on-year to 3.24 billion pesos in January, boosting investor confidence. Yesterday, the PSE Index climbed 0.2% to close at 63.06. Right now, we are slightly below that. The main gauge is flat with a downward bias. We're at 63.0. Right now, a 63.06. All shares index, however, is in the green, up by 0.2% to 37.30. As for the sub-indices, we're looking at a bit of a mixed picture. The financials and mining and oil counters are limiting the market's advance, while the industrial, holding firm, services, and property counters, are in the green. And at the foreign exchange market, the peso opened flat at 57.21 against the greenback from its previous close of 57.30. Now, the Philippines secures 637.4 million pesos in sales leads at the Berlin Tourism Trade Fair. This is a 30% increase from the 489 million pesos generated at the same exhibition in 2024. Maria Margarita Montemayor Nograles, Chief Operating Officer of the Tourism Promotions Board, explains that the Philippines' strong performance this year as international tour operators, travel agencies, and media representatives find the country more attractive as a travel destination. 29 private sector exhibitors, including travel agencies and hotel operators, joined the Philippine delegation. Key designations that caught the attention of foreign visitors include Siargao, Boracay, and Palawan, among others. The increased sales leads from the Berlin Trade Fair signals growing global interest in the country's tourism industry as more international travelers look to the Philippines. Now, businesses in the hospitality, transportation, and retail sectors could benefit from an expansion in tourism revenues, paving the way for economic recovery and job creation in a post-pandemic era. On another front, Metro Rail Transit, or MRT General Manager Oscar Bongon, is relieved of his post a day after Transportation Secretary Vince Dizon inspected the train system. Dizon has also ordered the extension of MRT3's service by at least 1 hour. The move is seen to improve commuter access and boost productivity, particularly for workers and businesses in the metro. A more efficient public transport system is crucial for supporting economic activities in the capital. G. Baroga reports.
Transportation Secretary Vince Dizon wants the MRT3 to run an hour longer at night and add more trains during peak hours. After taking a train ride himself, Secretary Dizon listened to commuters and saw firsthand what needs to change. In a message to reporters, the DOTR says that details of the new directive are still being finalized. Currently, the MRT3 runs daily from 4:30 a.m. at the North Avenue station to 10:09 p.m. at the Taft Avenue station. The last trip from North Avenue is at 9:30 p.m. During his inspection, Secretary Dizon boarded at Ayala Station with Undersecretary for Railways TJ Batan, waiting in line like everyone else.
Morning traffic is from LRT1, papasok ng MRT3.
At the Ayala Station, the transport chief took note of space issues, especially that the stop is known for heavy foot traffic. During the ride, Secretary Dizon chatted with a regular commuter who shared that his daily journey from Makati to Santolan, including the walk from the station to the jeepney stop, takes about an hour.
Pero kami plano doon natin yung mga covered na walkway para mas nakaalam yan. Parang ganito. Hindi, mas maganda dyan. Pero parang hindi ka mababasa. Kasi problema dyan, pagtagulan. Yun ang mga problema na nagbabahapan sa baba.
Secretary Dizon also checked the bus stop at Ayala and highlighted the need for better connections between the train and bus systems. Apart from covered walkways, he wants improvements like better lighting, repainted stations, faster queuing, and fixed card carousels. For BNC Mobility, G. Baroga.
Ajinomoto Philippines transitions its Bulacan and Cebu plants to 100% renewable energy, signaling a shift towards sustainable business practices. Companies adopting green technologies can strengthen their market position while lowering long-term energy costs. Sujin Kim has more.
We aim to reduce 50% in environmental impact through our business and extending the healthy life expectancy of over 1 billion people in the world.
Ajinomoto Philippines makes a bold commitment to tackling pollution, climate change, and food insecurity, reaffirming its role in sustainability. By end February, with the support of ASEAN Energy, Ajinomoto has successfully transitioned its manufacturing plants in Bulacan and Cebu to operate on 100% renewable energy. This shift resulted in a substantial annual reduction of more than 5,000 metric tons of carbon dioxide emissions, a major step towards the company's environmental targets.
Sustainability isn't just reducing waste. It is also about how we power our operations and affect the climate.
The company has also partnered with logistics providers to integrate electric vehicles into its distribution network, further cutting down on carbon emissions. In addition, Ajinomoto is repurposing industrial plastic waste, turning it into raw materials for cement production instead of dumping it in landfills. Ajinomoto is also making strides in reducing plastic waste, thinning its product packaging and replacing bulk polybags with paper bundles to cut down on non-biodegradable materials. Moreover, Ajinomoto ensures that 90% of its food waste is recycled, turned into animal feed rather than discarded.
Today, 100% of our food waste generated at our production facilities and from sales stations or sales return in Luzon is converted into animal feeds.
Sujin Kim, Bilyonaryo News Channel.
Over 8 countries may run out of HIV treatments. That's the stern warning from the World Health Organization, or WHO, after the Trump administration decided to pause U.S. foreign aid. The agency says the countries could exhaust their supply of HIV treatments in the coming months. This could undo 20 years of progress in fighting the disease. The WHO warns that this may lead to over 10 million additional HIV cases and 3 million HIV-related deaths.
The sudden cuts to U.S. funding are also affecting efforts to eradicate polio, to monitor the emergence of diseases such as avian influenza, and to respond to disease outbreaks and humanitarian crises. Almost 24 million people living in such crises are at risk of not being able to access essential health services. More than 2,600 health facilities in 12 humanitarian crises have already suspended services, at least partially, or will do very soon.
Protesters in Yemen lash out at the U.S. and Israel. This after the U.S. launched new airstrikes into their country on Monday. Washington was responding to the Houthi group's threats to international shipping. At least 53 people have been killed in those attacks, according to the Houthi-run health ministry. An official told Reuters that the attacks could continue for weeks. For global business, the escalation in Yemen could disrupt international shipping routes, particularly in the Red Sea and in the Gulf of Aden. Any interruption to these shipping lanes could increase shipping costs and cause delays in supply chains, impacting companies dependent on timely global trade. And that's it for Business 360. I'm Maiki Oreta. Keep it here on BNC, the Bilyonaryo News Channel.